All right, welcome back. In this session, we're going to continue to talk about the periodic table, but we're going to talk about something a little bit different that tends to confuse some people. We're going to talk about isotopes. Now, isotopes can confuse you, but I'm going to try to go through this in a pretty simple way to make it a little bit more understandable to you. Let's just pick an element. Let's say something like phosphorus that has this number on the periodic table and rounded 31. So we know from the last couple of sessions that means that you have 15 protons, you have 15 electrons because they're supposed to equal each other, and to get the neutrons you subtract 31 minus 15, you get 16 neutrons. And that's what you have for phosphorus. If you took an element such as calcium, it has the number 20 and rounded the number 40, so there's 20 protons and 20 electrons, and 40 minus 20 is 20 neutrons. And so we already know how to do that. But there are these things in the world that are called isotopes. And by definition, you'll want to write this down. Isotopes are going to be heavier or lighter versions of an atom. Heavier or lighter versions of an atom. And so an isotope, just like my brother and I do not weigh the same, even though we have the same parents, one of us is heavier than the other, we would be sort of isotopes of each other if we just look at the basics like that. So what does it mean to be heavier or lighter versions of an element? Well, here's an example. In the world, there's an element called phosphorus 32. Well, notice that it has the element dash 32. Well, a normal phosphorus is phosphorus with a 31. That's what we got off the chart. But this is a phosphorus 32. A phosphorus 32 is going to be a phosphorus, but it looks to be a little bit heavier. So whenever you see a dash and a number, that's an isotope. Well, first thing I know, it has 15 protons. That was really simple. How is that true? Well, we learned that that's how many protons it takes to be a phosphorus. If you change it, it's a different element. So it has to have 15 protons. That also means it has to have 15 electrons because it's supposed to equal 0. Neutrons. We said earlier that neutrons change the mass. The mass changed. It's heavier. So this time 15 minus 32 is not 16 neutrons, it is 17 neutrons. Very simply, this is what an isotope is. It happens to be a heavier version of that element. I'll give you another example. Calcium 38 is an isotope of calcium. It has 20 protons because all calciums have 20 protons. It has 20 electrons because 20 pluses have to be balanced by 20 minuses. 38 minus 20 is 18 neutrons. You'll notice it's not the same number of neutrons. So anytime you have an atom that is either heavier or lighter than the one on the chart, you always have dash and then its weight. It's still a phosphorus, it just weighs different. It's still a calcium, it just weighs different. Now let me give you an example that you may actually know if you're a big history person. Carbon-14 is used in dating old objects. They find an old relic and they want to know about how old it is. They will find out how much carbon-14 is in it, and then they'll figure out approximately how old it is. That's a very difficult process to do, but they can estimate its age. Well, if you look up carbon on the periodic table, carbon is 6 and then 12. That's a normal carbon. Well, this isn't a normal carbon, it's a carbon-14. So carbon-14, we know, has 6 protons because all carbons in the world have 6 protons, just like the one here on the left. It also has 6 electrons to equal 0. And 14 minus 6 gives me 8 neutrons. carbon 14, that's why it's called that, that's why the name looks like that. It's an isotope. Now, that isotope we've learned how to do something really cool with, like dating old objects. Not all isotopes do that. There are some in nature that have no real function. They're just heavier, lighter than the normal version. So in this case, you can see that a normal carbon has a weight of 12. This one's just a different one. So if it's heavier or lighter, you always have a value written like this. In the next session, you're going to practice, see if you can get some of those on your own as well.